finding focus with photography. I'm not talking about adjusting the focus on your lens or using autofocus. I'm talking about your vision in shooting and what you want to document and what you want to, just take photos of. There's a bit of a trap that happens where people are like, oh, I can't shoot where I live. I got to shoot, I can only shoot if I'm traveling, or I'm only inspired if I'm in a new space, which is very reasonable. When you go into a new space, it is fun. The novelty of everything is new and different. But finding a reason to shoot at home is a bit harder. And it's just the everyday life. And just a little trick, again, a little psychological trick I use for myself is like, well, if I can't go traveling and I want to shoot, I'm just going to shoot my commutes and, just everyday life. I'm just going to document my journey in between wherever I'm going. I'll make sure I have my camera. And for a good period, I was living in Abbotsford, which is a suburb just outside of the city of Melbourne. And I live right near Vic Street. And Vic Street is the hub of a very mixed demographic, but a large percentage of that demographic is, struggling people who live in commissions and drug abuse, live in commission houses, and suffer from drug abuse and alcoholism. But it's mainly drug abuse along there. It's a very problematic area. And on Vic Street, in the corner of a street called Nicholson Street, is a very popular spot for them to shoot up, to deal, to do whatever, to carry on. And there's just a lot of, it's a very lively place. Not a good kind of lively, it's actually quite sad, but it's animated, there's shit happening. And the tram that runs from Vic Street runs through to St Kilda, which is basically the other end of the line. Like St Kilda is very much the same as Abbotsford and Richmond in terms of there's, a mixed demographic going on there, and a lot of commission houses and a lot of drug abuse. And that tram is a main artery of Melbourne, basically, where they just seem to hop on and go back and forth and do their business. And I used to catch the tram 12 to South Melbourne for work, so I'd always be along Vic Street, and I'd always be in that area. And then when I wasn't working, I'd just go for walks along Vic Street and bring my camera in. There was always something going on. There's always, I'd always find a reason and to bring my camera. And because of that, it wasn't that I was going, I just want to be clear, I wasn't just going out and like, oh, there's someone, who's just shot up, I'll get a photo of that. Or someone actively shooting up, I'll get a photo of that. Or, this person just passed out, whatever. That was the reality of it, but I was more just trying to document the reality of my life living in Abbotsford. I didn't just exclusively shoot people struggling. It was a mixed demographic. There's a lot of, Abbotsford's quite an affluent area now, so you have a lot of wealthy young families who have moved in there. And then East Melbourne, which is the next suburb over, is generational wealth. And then sort of that inner east area is of money. So, like I said, it was a very mixed demographic going through there. Have a lot of affluent people taking this tram, and then a lot of not so affluent people taking this tram. And that was the life. So I tried to document all areas of this as best as I could at the time. So it wasn't just I was just gunning for like easy pickings of people passed out or whatever. But my point is, it was very, very lively. So it was easy to stay focused on shooting because there was always stuff happening. Like there was always a reason to have my camera out. But then I moved away from Abbotsford and I moved further out. My daughter was on her way. Hayley was pregnant and my daughter was on her way. We didn't know it was my daughter at the time, but we wanted a bit more of a better house. Our house was a bit of a crack den. It was a fun house to live in, but it was pretty cooked. So we moved out somewhere that was a bit more cleaner and a bit more easy to maintain and live in day to day, especially having now a young family. But having moved out there, first we moved to Preston, there wasn't much happening along in Preston, and I'd still bring my camera out. I was like, oh, this is a bit grim. Like, I'd just go for walks. I'm like, there's not really that much to shoot here. Like, there'd be occasional things like on the side of the street happening, or like, you come across some form of commotion, and I was like, oh, this is pretty difficult to shoot, and I felt a bit uninspired. But I'd still catch the tram, and this one is a different tram as the 86. It's not quite as colourful and condensed as the tram 12 was, but there's still stuff going on. So I was like, oh, well, maybe I can get my kick here. There might not be quite as much happening on the tram as the 12, but I'm still able to, I still find something to shoot. There's still going to be stories to be told here. I'll still try and find a reason to document my life through this journey and commute. And then, it was walking around, it was day to day, it was a lot harder. And then we ended up moving to a bigger house, the next suburb over. And it's a much better house, and there's much more commotion going on though this side of town where we are. So sort of brought, like, having staged shooting that whole time on the tram, I still catch the 86. That story is now continued, and it's come out, and just going for walks. Like, we've got a creek right near us, so I go for a walk. I bring my camera down there. There's really small things that happen that are worth documenting, and then there's commotions that happen just walking to and from along the street that I'm like, well, if I bring my camera, I have a high chance of getting these shots. No way near the frequency as living in Abbotsford near Vic Street, but there's still life happening, and to me there's still a reason to document my life and what I see, and try and make it in some form of artistic game for myself, or an autistic game for myself, whatever you want to call it. That's cool. But the main thing is, through all that, like, moving from like this hot spot where it was just like there was infinite inspiration to shoot and reason to shoot because it was so lively, to then move further out and there's much less going on, it's much more calm, and like the tram itself is good, but I'm not on the tram every day. And I can't, like, just going for a walk isn't quite the same as having Vic Street and the city right there. Like, I could walk to the city in 15 minutes. Like, it was very, very accessible, and there was just so much happening. But I was still able to keep that drive and focus moving further out. And although, as I said, it's much less, the volume is much less than what it was, it makes these little moments when something does come up, you seem to cherish it more because it is more of an anomaly. It's not just easy picking all the time. You become more observant and patient, and I think that translates as well when I go out and I do go into more lively areas. I'm much more considerate of what's happening around me. It's not just like shoot as much as I can. I mean, I was still trying to be considerate when I was lived in the city, but much more so now. I'm able to absorb and really draw in, like, what is the scene here, rather than just being like, there's so much going on, I'll just try and capture as much as I can. It's just like, well, there might be a lot happening, but what is the key focus in this situation? And having slowed down, it gives me that ability to then take on, I've said this before, slowing down is important, but I think slowing down but still having your eye active and being in that focus zone allows you to continue to shoot and operate again at a higher level. So yeah, I just want to talk about, just because you're not, a vagabond and you're just running around all over the world taking photos, or you live in these hot spots, doesn't mean you can't document good things things that are happening around you and get your fills. Because I'd say, although it is still fun going out and shooting like in these areas, I still get a good kick out of just bringing my camera with me if I'm walking down the creek or I'm going down the street. There's, one out of 3 times there's going to be something worth shooting, and it just, it is more frequent than I thought. It's not, every time I go out there's something happening, but again, you're having that patience and being reserved, it makes it more rewarding. So yeah, just a little game you can play with yourself. Just stay focused, even if there's not a lot happening. There'll be some scenes that pop up. You're like, that's worth documenting. That's worth me taking my time to shoot. So you know the drill. There's a like, there's a subscribe. Do both, maybe not. And comment if you think I'm wrong. Comment if you think I'm right. Comment if you feel like commenting. That's the biggest thing to say. So anyway, Godspeed. Thanks for today, fellas.